Welcome to KDRTV, Pastor Ngetich. Sami, we are very happy that you have found some time to come and sit with us. And to our listeners, we've got Pastor Ngetich in our studios. He lives in North Carolina, but he's a very prolific pastor, and most of us like him. So today we've got a few questions we would love him actually to highlight or explain to the community, because these are questions which were statistically taken from the community. So our first question, Pastor Ngetich, what do you think about giving children stipend while they're growing or in the family?
Mr. Gutwa, it's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity. I'm excited about your name, to know that we share the same meaning of Gutwa as the crown.
Thank you.
In terms of the stipend, in terms of helping the children grow, the purpose of the stipend is really to reward some of the things that they are doing right. But not only to reward, but also teach them how to do the budgeting. If you're only giving them a stipend without sitting down with them and saying, out of this stipend that you're getting, how do we learn to be able to budget for the future? So that they would divide it into three. One would be a place where you teach them to give charity, whether it's tithes, whether it's offerings, they are able to give from that. And therefore they learn as they grow that I need to be able to give a portion to God, to have gratitude in what I am doing. The other second portion is for savings. So they will know that out of that, 1/3 of it will be for charities, the next one will be for my own savings. And then the other third one will be now for the expenses. Whatever they want to do with it, that's up to them. But when they learn to be able to do these three things, they will learn to be able to be responsible. That is how you begin to inculcate issues of investments when they are that young. It's there that you sit down and teach them what portfolios to be able to look at. And if you set up that from the beginning when they are young, you'll be surprised how much money they will have by the time they go into retirement when you start early. So it's not just a bribe, but it is a teachable moment that you can be able to use to be able to show them how to be able to live. But at the same time, you're teaching them the responsibility, because if that doesn't happen or they don't fulfill some of their duties, then they don't get it. Or there are times when it can become even a form of discipline, because if they do something else against what we had agreed, then they get money taken out from that. And if they are able to see that, you have many other avenues of being able to get at them. So this is not only a very isolated case, but it's something that can be a teachable moment to prepare them for the future. It can be a place where discipline can be inculcated. It can be a place also where you can be reinforcing some things and leaving the other ones to die out. So there are so many things that can come as a result of this if it's done right.
Thank you very much, Pastor. And what's the best way to deal with defiance in children?
Now, when it comes to an issue of defiance, I think you and your wife have to be on the same page on that. And there are specific things that you may be able to do that brings the attention of the child to know that this is crossing the boundary and it will not be tolerated. But after the discipline has been ministered, whatever both of you agree, there will be a time when the child has to come back after you've given them an opportunity. Because sometimes when discipline is administered, one of the things is that our parents insist, don't cry, go to your room, or you continue yelling, I'll give you something to yell about. But really, you are denying them the right to be able to air their own emotions. Once the discipline has been administered, if they go out crying, give them time to do that so that they can be able to get those emotions out, and then call them back and sit down and ask the question, how did we arrive here? Why did we have to do this? This is something that daddy hates to be able to do. This is what mommy doesn't want to like. But this is what happens if I let you go down the road. And then you talk about what consequences are there. Most of the time when it comes to discipline, there are consequences embedded to the decision. And what you're teaching the child is that I'm not disciplining you because you made me mad. No, but I'm giving you the embedded consequences of the choice. So in other words, when you made that decision, it's at that time that you chose the consequence. And there is no way that you can make a decision and try to bypass the consequence. So they learn that every decision they made has a consequence. You make a good decision, the consequences will come that are good. So, for example, if they don't do something and there was a consequence to it, then they are trying to say this is not fair, this is not this, but it's like, you know what? So they begin to learn that every decision has a consequence, and therefore it helps them to be able to think about the consequences before they make the decision.
Thank you very much, Pastor. There's another question here we really need you to tackle again. We are talking about racism. You know, we are in America, and sometimes we might assume that everything is okay, and the children are going to school, the children are in church, or they are anywhere, but there's this basic issue, we are talking about racism, and we do not actually basically assume it. So what do you tell a child who finds himself or herself in that particular situation?
Understanding the human mind and how we behave helps the child. For example, when you teach them about an animal in the woods, a cat or a dog, when the cat sees a dog coming, they go into a defensive mode. They puff up to be able to scare them away. We are also wired like that. When we are in unfamiliar situations, we go into the defensive mode. And then before long, we realize that if I have another person that looks like me, then we can help each other watch over our backs. And so we get to gravitate towards those that look like me as a survival mechanism against those that don't look like me. So the issue of racism is an assumption that whoever looks like me will be better pairing with me, and anything that does not look like me may be a source of danger. So when animals are out there, sometimes you see the grass move and the next thing you see is pain in your heel. And then you run away and you realize that a snake bit you. The next time you see the bushes moving, you're not waiting, you begin to run.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
So it is embedded and hardwired in our brain to be able to change from the limbic system, from the prefrontal lobe of the cerebral cortex in the brain to the limbic system that makes you run away for life. So when you see something that doesn't look like you, you become suspicious. So it is helpful for our children to know that sometimes racism is as a result of people assuming that if you're different, you are dangerous. So helping them, educate them, or understand that sometimes it comes out of ignorance. 2, it also helps the child to say, in what cases are we also racist? It may not be racism, but it may be tribalism. If you don't speak my language, then I'll look at you and treat you differently because you're from another community. So then they begin to realize that, wait a minute, I don't like racism from another race, but it's the same impact that another person from a different tribe gets when I treat them like that. So when I understand that ignorance is part of this, how do I, number one, I'm able to deal with this? By being patient while I try to educate them until they know who I am. Secondly, how do I not internalize this so that it begins to crush my self-esteem if it's coming from out of ignorance? But then how do I also empower myself to stand for myself? Because either I can take it and go cry every time and feel like I am a nobody, or I can inappropriately act out and punch their nose, which gets me in trouble. But how can I do it in such a way that it's an empowered response that can be able to help them understand that I am maybe different, but I am closer? A lot of, for example, genomics have shown that when you look at across races, there's so much differences within the races than even between the races. It's over 98.8% difference within the races and only 0.02% inter-races. So there are so much that somebody else that doesn't look like you may actually be closer to you and more helpful to you. So empowering children to understand the whole issue. There are also issues of, not only racism, but issues of colonialism that came to us and many other layers that are added to this. It's also about the issue of selfishness and the fear of the scarcity. That's called the economy of scarcity, where we feel like there won't be enough love to go around. So as a result of that, understanding that if we think in the positives, if we think on how to be able to empower other people and to be able to share, then we will live together with understanding, so that an enemy is actually a friend you have not known yet.
Thank you very much, Pastor. Let's now take another perspective about raising our kids, especially in churches. Sometimes we've seen elders complain about the way the kids basically behave in churches. And if you go to different churches, let me be specific about Caucasian churches. Sometimes there are some complaints actually coming that some kids or some children are actually misbehaving. They are not taking some instructions. They are spoiling some of the facilities. So what advice do you think we should give to the parents?
In terms of discipline, particularly within the church, I think there is a situation where we've switched from one extreme to the other extreme, where sometimes we are so hands-on and sometimes so rough in castigating the children and inflicting pain, to a place where we've shifted all the way to a place where we talk about not touching the child so that we don't wound their self-esteem. And so from one extreme to the other extreme, from a very authoritarian to a very permissive society or laissez-faire society. But I think there is a strike of a balance that needs to be done, where children have to be allowed time to be able to understand some things and to question some things. But then you sit down and train them and explain to them why. Because there was a time when children could not be able to question an adult. But we are living in a country where if every child is supposed to obey every elder, then it's easy to be able to kidnap them. Because somebody in this country can be able to call them and kidnap them, but they need to be able to question that. And so even when your child questions you why, then it's time to be able to sit down and explain to them why. Because sometimes it's like, well, wait a minute. I couldn't ask my father why. And then why are you able to ask me that? But there is a place where cultures have changed. And there are people that can be able to take advantages of children, so that you need to empower them to interrogate and question, so that they don't blindly end up doing this. We see even terrorism. We've seen children that have been radicalized, and they have gone into the dogmatic extremism because they have not sat down to interrogate and question that kind of a dogma. So, but if you raise them to be able to think for themselves, it may mean sometimes even them questioning who you are and why. But if you are training them to be able to see the logic on it and why this is important, then you prepare them to be an adult that cannot just obey without questioning. We see this in politics too, where mass politics are taken advantage by politicians to be able to swing people into hostilities, into tribal clashes, into all these kinds of things without questioning, wait a minute. When somebody says, tunamalizwa, our people are being targeted, wait a minute, I need to interrogate that. What do you mean by that? What did you do? People don't want to do this, and then the last minute they want to throw in the tribal card. They want to throw in the racist card. And it's time to say, well, wait a minute, time out. What do you mean? So if you train your child that way, then they are able to stand and face this situation. We see even in churches, where we have mega churches, where sometimes pastors take advantage of that, and they are able to sway people into believing things. We have now places where churches becomes a place where people mint money, and the gullible are actually sucked in. What kind of children are we training? Children will grow, they will have to go to the streets, they will be sagging pants, there will be all kinds of things. Will they dress to look like them, or will they stand up and make that decision? How you're training them will show what kind of children you're going to produce.
Thank you very much. Then what's the best method to support your child in his or her own, in his or her own academics?
The best way to support our children, number one, is to be able to understand the value of education. But not only just cramming and route regurgitation of what they have learned, but to be able to have that critical, analytical thinking. So that when they are reading a book, then the question would be, what did you see in that book? What did that book say? What was not said in that book? If a man wrote that book, what will happen if a woman would have written the same book and handled the same topic? What will a female have put there that a man did not put? This person wrote because they are from this race. They are writing about Africa. Okay, what about if an African wrote about Africa? Or if an African wrote about the white man? So the child will be able to realize that, wait a minute, every person that writes a book comes at it from a different perspective. So how do I understand this from that perspective? And if I stood in a different place, would I look at it differently? So helping them to do their homework, helping to avail time when they can ask questions, helping them to be able to prioritize work before they go into social media. Because what we're happening now, we are competing with social media. But even if we have to use social media because we cannot avoid it, how can we leverage the social media rather than castigate it? How can they use that? And the question now would be, I don't want you to play that game. I want you to play that game for a week. And the next week you've designed a game of your own that they will pay you money. I don't want you to be paying money to play the game. I want people to pay money to you to play your game. Then you challenge them to be able to think in terms of, how can I interrogate this? How can I be able to leverage this and use it? How am I using this not just as an escape, but maybe as a reward after I've finished my work? So parenting will require that, and you being on the same page with your spouse. And if you're a single mom, again, it can be challenging. But the whole issue of education is not only teaching them to regurgitate what they have learned, but to have them critically analyze some of the things. And not only that, but also, is it practical education? Is it training the head? What about the heart? What about the hand? If it's an education that trains the head and the hand, but not the heart, then you'll have a very educated thief. Or you will have a terrorist who can blow us to Timbuktu because the heart is not trained. How can I, in the process, train their head, train their heart, and train their hand, so that what they have learned theoretically is subjected to the crucible of practicality, so that it is something that changes them, that they are better off for being educated, rather than bragging because of the theories they have.
Thank you very much, Pastor. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your advice.
Thank you.
And I believe that next time we'll have more questions for you and more viewers to listen exactly what you are telling us. So this is KDRTV, and we've been having Pastor Ngetich Sami. He has given us some insight about how to live well in the United States or in diaspora. So please, if you've got time, share this information with your friends. Wherever you would like them to listen, whatever you would like them to, the information you would like them to get, please send us some of your questions, send us your suggestions, so that we can present those questions to panelists or to experts like Pastor Ngetich.
Thank you
very much, Sami, and may God bless you.
Thank you,
we'll
sir.
Meet next time.
God bless.
Welcome.